Good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this public broadcast. 2 days ago, Nigeria woke up to the information that the AGF, Malami, have sent a secret memo to President Muhammadu Buhari to suspend Nigerian constitution and declare martial law. While the AGF have denied the report, still Nigerians are asking, should President Muhammadu Buhari declare a state of emergency in Nigeria in view of the runaway terrorism, insurgency, banditry, and general breakdown of security around the country? So tonight we have 4 gentlemen to discuss this topic. We have Dr. Daniel Bwala, barrister at Lincoln's Inn, and a special advisor to the Deputy Senate President. Dr. Bwala, you are welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
We also have Mr. Ifeanyi Nrialike, a partner, a senior lawyer at Ikechukwu, Ezechukwu San & Co. Chambers. He's an Abuja-based legal practitioner. Mr. Nrialike, you are welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
We also have Mr. Emeka Ugwuonye, Esquire. Mr. Ugwuonye is the president, Eculaw Group, the founder and CEO of the very popular Due Process Advocate. Mr. Ugwuonye, you are welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Last but by no means the least is Mr. Adamu Garba, the second. Mr. Garba contested the 2019 presidential contest in the APC party. He's not here with us.
Okay, thank you very much, Dan. Thank you for the introduction. And again, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Dr. Bwala. Thank you, my good brother, Emeka Ugwuonye, and thank you, Ifeanyi, there. Now, to kickstart, let me probably start with Bwala, because again, I have in recent times seen him firing from all cylinders in the in the airwave. Bwala, like Dan said at the beginning, obviously we have been experiencing serious insurgency in the country. Now the question is, should the president declare a state of emergency? Do you think there is any need for such?
Right, thank you for having me. A couple of things. Let's start with the housekeeping. I think that there is fundamentally a problem with the reportage about the advice of the Attorney General on the President, that he should suspend the Constitution and declare martial law. First of all, the President does not have the powers under the law to suspend a Constitution that gave him in the first place legitimacy. Once he suspends the Constitution, then himself lacks legitimacy to then operate on the Constitution. Because if you look at Section 5, all of the powers of the President is derived from Section 5, and he is to maintain and defend the Constitution. So you cannot suspend what you are legitimately mandated to defend. And then secondly, the President cannot declare a martial law. Martial law can only be declared by a military junta, military interregnum, military administration. A civilian government cannot declare martial law. What the President can do is what you have rightly pointed out. So we have just corrected the reportage, but back to our conversation, whether the President can declare the state of emergency. The President can, in conjunction with the National Assembly, declare state of emergency, but I do not think the situation is right for the President to declare state of emergency for the following reasons. The idea behind state of emergency is that there are matters of urgent national importance, national attention, and national security. So take, for example, in the wake of the pandemic, the President can declare state of emergency and then through proclamation, begin to set aside some administrative bottleneck, like the way they did in America. As soon as the state of emergency was declared in the health sector, all those administrative bottlenecks in various states that would naturally require, for example, in New York, they suspended, or rather they overlooked 20 state laws So that, for example, if you have had a training on how you can administer the test for COVID through this swab, then you do not need the requirement of the law that you must be registered, you must have been licensed to do so. So under a state of emergency like that, once given, some administrative or some laws will be set aside. Now, in a given situation, the contemplation is that if the president declares state of emergency, they will keep aside or overlook, or they will not be held liable if they violate certain fundamental human rights. If you look at Section 35, you see that there is no need for now for the declaration of state of emergency, because Section 35 is quite sufficient to tackle the present situation as it stands. I know the National Assembly asked the president to declare state of emergency, the Senate, the House of Rep, and different persons have asked him. But to me, the time has not come. You only declare national emergency or state of emergency in Nigeria as a country when close to half of the federation is engulfed in a crisis that is overwhelming the security architecture to deal with it. But as long as you can still deal with situation, you don't have to. I'll give you an example. Section 35 says everybody is entitled to the right to life, but there are some qualifications. If in the course of insurrection, in the course of riot, and by an order of court, or they are trying to prevent you from killing somebody or destroying property, you lose your life, then you cannot take that one to give. Your people can't take that one in court to say it is actionable. Now, that is sufficient to deal with the insecurity, because all that is required is for the president to empower the necessary security operatives of government to then begin to clamp down on insurrection or criminal elements that want to destroy the state. And this has nothing to do with a particular region, a particular people, because the way crimes are committed in Nigeria, there is no part of Nigeria where heinous crimes are not committed.
Okay, thank you very much for that intro. So, I mean, that's the perspective that you're basically coming from. That is very, very well welcomed. Now, before I come to Ifeanyi, let me go to Barrister Emeka Ugwuonye. Now, you've heard what Bwala said. Now, do you think that, in any way that the president, bearing in mind the current situation in Nigeria, be it by state or the whole federation, that there might be a need for state of emergency?
Well, thanks to the earlier speaker who clarified some basic conceptual issue regarding the origin or the motive or the processes through which the issue of state of emergency arose. But looking at the question, I think it's less of a legal question than a political one. Because if it's a legal question, we simply say that the Constitution is pretty straightforward on what is required for the president to declare state of emergency. Essentially, if he gets the appropriate or the requisite support of the National Assembly, if he complies with the letters of the Constitution, he meets the requirement of law. But the bigger question, which is before us, goes beyond law. That is, do we consider it appropriate, taking everything into consideration, for the president to declare state of emergency? When you talk of state of emergency, you have to look at it from two angles. You have to look at what led to it to determine whether indeed there is an emergency. It must be something sudden, unexpected, which could not have been anticipated through the normal lawmaking process or governance. So we're asking, do we have a sudden, unexpected situation in Nigeria that could have overwhelmed the government, that could not have been foreseen by the government? If you look at it and ask, or take the breakdown of law and order or the insecurity in Nigeria as that event, the unexpected sudden development, the challenge you have is that there is nothing that happened that has not been expected. Nigeria has been engulfed in instability, security all the time, all the days, even before he became the president. One of the things he campaigned upon was to control the insurgency led by Boko Haram. So he couldn't just say this happened overnight, requiring state of emergency. We're dealing with a consistent failure of governance that built up over time since he came to power. Indeed, the situation worsened. Look at the difficulties we had in getting him to appoint new security chiefs. People were crying out that there were problems building up, and the government was not responding adequately. So essentially, this is not an emergency. It built up, we saw it coming, he ought to have seen it coming. Then a second part of the challenge you deal with when you analyze the suitability of state of emergency is you deal with purpose. What is the purpose? What is supposed to be achieved during that state of emergency, which is essentially involves suspension of civil liberties? What are the measures? What is the government going to do? What is the purpose? What will be the outcome? So it goes back again to what brought us where we are. The government cannot say it has any new solution that it has not tried in the past 4 years. The government could not say that it failed to achieve result or to reduce instability because it was burdened by due process requirements, which needs to be suspended now in order for it to be more effective. So essentially, there is no justification for it. Because honestly, seen from both angles, there's no justification for it. The state of emergency, when declared in this circumstance, will essentially empower the government to suppress opposition, to do something else that is not in the interest of the people. My feeling is, of course, any effort, anything that could be done to stop the menace we face in Nigeria today ought to be tried. But being honest to ourselves, there's no justification for emergency. There's no emergency, and there's no clear path of what the government plans to do to change the situation. I don't see the purpose of it, and I don't see the emergency in this.
Okay, so let me just piggyback on what you said. You do not see the need, and obviously there is no purpose, you said. Before I get to Ifeanyi, if I go back to what happened in Plateau State, when I think Darie was the governor, right? Just opposing it to what is happening today in some states. In the case of Darie, we didn't have 300 students in Plateau being taken away in one day. We didn't have, the sheer number that we had at that point being taken away. But if we compare, if you do a comparative analysis, it appears that we have more such large number of crime happening now as opposed to the time that, or things that happened that led to state of emergency being declared in that state. So the question then to you is, what then, should we then put it this way? Should we then go and apologize to the people of Plateau for what happened in that state then, if what is happening now is grievier than what happened before that state of emergency was declared?
Again, you come to the distinction between the legal processes for declaration of emergency and the political issues of when it is suitable for it to happen. In Darie's case, Obasanjo met technically the legal requirement. Nobody challenged it in court. It was validly done following the letters of the Constitution, which this president could pretty much do. He can go to the National Assembly tomorrow and they give him all the necessary powers and he declares a state of emergency. We will say that the letters of the law have been met. So the question, the political question being presented to us today did not arise during Darie's case. If it arose, I probably might have said the same thing. Whether the situation that arose in Plateau State required the extraordinary measures of a state of emergency. Before we forget, a state of emergency is actually intended to enable the government to bypass certain restrictions, due process requirements that will be appropriate in the normal state of affairs. So the earlier speaker was very right when he said state of emergency requires bypassing restrictions that are put in place to check government. It involves accumulation and exercise of extraordinary powers. Politically speaking, is it justified? Hell no. Legally speaking, is it justified? Well, it's up to him and the National Assembly.
Thank you very much. So, Ifeanyi, Nrialike, please, I'm coming to you now. What is then your view, bearing in mind what Dr. Daniel Bwala and Emeka Ugwuonye have just said? What is then your view? You know, again, I'm trying to use Plateau State once more as a touch point. Do you think that there was an overreaction in the point that Dario was removed from office and state of emergency declared in the state?
Good evening. I thank you once again for having me on this platform. First of all, before we go to the issue of Plateau State, we must first of all appreciate what we meant by state of emergency. A state of emergency or emergency power is a situation in which a government is empowered to be able to put through policies that it will normally not be permitted to do in order to provide safety and protection of their citizens. Principally, a state of emergency is provided for to save life and property. I don't think President Obasanjo was wrong in declaring state of emergency in Plateau State when he did so in 2014, in 2004. What actually happened was that in September of that of 2001, there was crisis in Jos. As a result of that crisis in Plateau State, 2,000 persons lost their lives, 2,000 persons in crises that engulfed Christians and Muslims in various communities. But the question was, why did Obasanjo wait for probably 3 years? Because he declared that state of emergency in 2004 before he did. Why did he wait for 2 years, 3 years? Because the issue happened in 2001 and he declared it in 2004. In as much, when you look at it under this provision of the Constitution, particularly section 301, 305, subsection 1, there were bases upon which to declare state of emergency in Plateau State. But the question was, could he have validly suspended the governor as he did? The Constitution was silent on it, whether you can suspend the governor or not. When President Goodluck Jonathan proclaimed the state of emergency in Yobe, Adamawa, and Borno, the governors were not suspended. So putting into consideration what happened then, there was need for state of emergency to be declared. But the extent of declaration of state of emergency then was equally entirely a different kettle of fish. Nothing was just like Mr. Ugwuonye Emeka said. The people of Plateau, or even Daria, they didn't challenge it. They just waited. After 6 months, they went back to office. So as it concerns the state of emergency in the present day, I will say that there are situations that have caused so much anxiety in the states, in the country. The country completely is under siege. But before you declare a state of emergency, you must ask yourself basic questions. Have the government honestly and sincerely done all they are supposed to do? The simple answer is that the federal government have not done all they are supposed to do. They allow things to run as they want. That is why people are behaving the way they are behaving. You can see the headsmen running haywire. Most of the things that are happening are reactionary. If the security agencies are working and doing the things they are supposed to be doing, there will not be any need for proclamation of the state of emergency. And as God will have it, the Attorney General of the Federation has come out to deny ever issuing such a memo calling for martial law. Because one, if you are calling for martial law, you are shooting yourself on the leg. And you are equally at the same time denying Nigerians the dividends of democracy, which allows them to elect who is going to be their leader. This is not a military government, but a democratic one. So, and the Attorney General, being the custodian of the law, cannot, and it cannot properly call for martial law in Nigeria. So, as far as I'm concerned, in as much as the environment for declaration of state of emergency is there, but the federal government has not done enough. And even a declaration of state of emergency cannot even solve the problem. Because first of all, you must show that you have done everything you are supposed to do. You must check the things that are causing the problems. And after you finish checking the things that are causing the problem and tried to solve them within the constitutional regulation, it is after you fail to solve them within the constitutional regulation that you can now go ahead probably to suspend Chapter 4 of the Constitution, that is the enforcement of fundamental rights, and they bypass all the other red tape that will make it difficult for you to function, and then go ahead to function. But the situation as it is now, the government has sincerely not done enough to warrant state of emergency being declared. That is my simple and honest opinion. But as at the time that there was the declaration of state of emergency in Plateau State, it called for it. It's just like saying 2,000 persons massacred in Abuja or in any state of the Federation at a time. It is more than enough to call for state of emergency.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, I'll allow Mr. Daniel Bwala to take over, but before I do that, Mr. Bwala, are we talking about the sheer number? Because remember when Goodluck Jonathan declared state of emergency in Adamu and the Yobe? Is it about the number of people that were dying or the activities uncheckmarked? What principle are we looking at about here? Because Ifeanyi is talking about 2,000 people when the 2,000 people died in Plateau, but we're looking at where within 2 months between Kaduna and between Kaduna, Zamfara, and Katsina, probably over 2,000 people have been kidnapped in the last couple of months. So, are we talking about state of emergency when it leads to death or when the action happens?
Right. I don't think that number of casualties of death is the prerequisite for the declaration of state of emergency. As a matter of fact, when President Obasanjo declared state of emergency in Plateau State, it was because the House of Assembly of Plateau, I think, said some things about him, and the governor also echoed it. So it was politically motivated. The number of deaths at the time could not be ascertained, but there were religious crises. So that religious crisis will qualify for state of emergency when it becomes of a nature where people cannot go out to work, the governor cannot operate. So it is the nature of the crisis and not the number of deaths. In Yobe, President Goodluck Jonathan was perfectly within his right because Boko Haram had actually taken a greater part of local government in Yobe. And that is a direct threat on the national security and territorial integrity. So he had to declare state of emergency because, again, he was burdened with the need to put the place in peace for the conduct of election to take place. So that's what he did. But let us get a little bit of distinction between declaring state of emergency in a federating unit and declaring state of emergency in the country. They have different acid tests. When it relates to a federating unit, you're dealing with laws of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, governed and guided. But when it deals with the context in which we are talking today, which is the president declaring state of emergency in Nigeria, it's a different kettle of fish. Under the UN Convention, all the signatories, after you declare state, I remember Argentina did that, Brazil did that. When you declare state of emergency, it is incumbent on the government of Nigeria to serve the United Nations with three things. One, the nature, the reason behind the state of emergency. Two, the duration of time the state of emergency will last. And three, what specific rights that the government of Nigeria sought to suspend in order to quell crisis. So it is not that the president can wake up after having a good tea and decide to declare state of emergency and suppress all rights. Under the UN Convention, you must specify. The reason they provided that and they asked the member nations who are signatories to it to comply is because they do not want a situation where a president that is becoming unpopular will use the guise of state of emergency to suppress civil expression of thoughts. Because when a government is becoming unpopular, usually people begin to then express their grievances. And all over the world, there is no country of the world where a president serving in his second term, he is not as unpopular as he was when he came in his first time. The second term of Obama, they nearly stoned him. It's like that because in the second time, people will use all the things you say as your promise and what you have actually done and then perform. Bill Clinton, in his second term, he was praised because in the second term, despite this impeachment thing, he was able to create a very solid economy in the United States. So declaring state of emergency in the country is a different kettle of fish. I don't think the environment, the situation has created that. If, for example, IPOB now, they shut down the Southeast, and then Arewa, whatever, Boko Haram, shut down the North, and then you have in the Southwest, or IPOB is in conflict with Boko Haram, or Igbos are in conflict with Yorubas, when it becomes of a nature where it is likely to cause a reprisal effect, even if not a single person has died, the nature of the crisis will warrant that the government should declare state of emergency and suppress rights. But if it is in relation to a state, the president or even the governor in that state can declare state of emergency for the purposes of administering whatever it is that it is intended to be administered. Because it's not just in crisis, like I said, in healthcare, you can declare state of emergency. You can declare state of emergency in natural disaster. You can declare state of emergency as a country when Nigeria is engaged in a war with another country. But I'm sure the context in which Malami's alleged advice was discussed that they said there is crisis in the country and the president should declare state of emergency. There are acid tests and the situation does not warrant it at the moment. Because if the president should go ahead to declare state of emergency, it means that the free speech by the media houses, if you have noticed lately, almost all the media houses, their breakfast, lunch, and dinner is Buhari. So if you declare state of emergency, you're going to have to stop them from talking in some way. And then people, newspaper people, and then people who express themselves in media and public space. And people will not keep quiet. So by the time you begin to push and push and push, you will then push the country to anarchy. So in a nutshell, as it relates to a country, until the country's direction is tilted towards a failed state, it does not warrant the declaration of state of emergency. But physically, if you look at what is happening in Imo, if after a period of time and the crisis is not quelled, it may warrant a situation for the declaration of state of emergency.
Really, in Imo, but is the crisis in Imo greater than the crisis that we have in Maiduguri or Borno to be precise?
Yes. The difference is clear. In the case of Borno, it is a well-defined insurgent, Boko Haram, one. Number two, they are not living in the city. They have already gone to Sambisa. They only come in and go out, come in and go out. So you have isolated them. In the case of Imo, it is citizens, people who are not only agitating against the government at the federal level, they are agitating against the governor and they are agitating against certain installation of government. I am saying that if the situation escalates, I'm not saying now, if the situation escalates, then it may warrant a situation of declaration of state of emergency. And it's not the type of state of emergency where the president will declare and remove the governor. It's a state of emergency where the governor himself will declare in his state so he can get the armed forces and other relevant security agencies to suppress it. But again, like I said, the situation has not yet come.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Mr. Daniel Bwala.
Yes, let me quickly point out one issue before I ask my question. When President Obasanjo declared a state of emergency in 2000, that was in
2001.
2004. Yeah,
May 14, 2004.
Okay, civil society organizations, including the national chairman of National Conscience Party, Chief Gani Fawehinmi, late, went to court to challenge the declaration of state of emergency in Plateau State. The matter went up to the Supreme Court, and on 21st January 2006, the Supreme Court dismissed the suit filed by the Plateau State government challenging the declaration of emergency rule by then President Obasanjo. I don't know the outcome of the suit filed by civil society organizations in that matter. If anyone have, he could make that information available to us. But interestingly, Dr. Bwala said that Nigeria is not yet a failed state. Let me ask Mr. Ugwuonye directly this question. Do you agree with John Campbell that Nigeria is fast becoming a failed state, and that the United States government should treat, not only the United States, but Western governments should treat Nigeria as a failed state? Do you agree with him?
Well, Daniel, you know, all these terms they're conclusory in nature. The critical thing is for us to look at the indicators, the signs, which, as you realize, in the report by Bob Brodberg, who happens to be my boss 25 years ago, and Mr. Campbell, they pointed out certain indicators. These are the critical factors. How we ultimately interpret these indicators will depend. But all they said are legitimate. Nigerian government has not been able to enforce its own laws. Nigerian government has not been able to perform basic functions of a state, which is expected of every state in the international community. You have to understand that the way, our audience have to understand that the way the world works is that the international community has certain expectations of every state in terms of what they could do or should do to maintain world order. When one state cannot perform its basic functions, it almost always spirals into consequences to neighbors and the rest of the world. That is where the global interest comes in. So the indicators are there. The question is, can Nigeria do something about it? That is why when you look at all these things, you are looking at a government as a continuum. A government in power must be assessed, not just by what is happening at the moment, but what has happened in the recent past. And to what extent do they indicate what might happen in the future? The gentleman who spoke just before you got back to me, he said, we're not yet there. But the question is, he couldn't say exactly when we are there. Are there specific numerical metrics we could use to say, all right, on certain dates or a certain number, or okay, 3 police stations have been burnt. If it gets to 5, that will be it. If it gets to 7, that will be it. We don't have that. So it's ultimately going to boil down to the good judgment of a government that is trusted. If a government is trusted and the government is functioning, doing its own best, and the government comes in to say, hey, give me extra power so I could do more, people will say, sure. But when a government fails to do its own best and fails, in other words, can a government use its own failure as an excuse for state of emergency? Can a government underperform, fail, and instead of being voted out by the electorate, says, hey, let me give myself more powers? What do you do with the powers? Okay, the gentleman was trying to distinguish, and rightly so, what you do with state of emergency powers. He mentioned the case of a judge, where the president essentially did certain things different from what Jonathan did. So at what point do you determine whether a state of emergency should lead to the removal of the governor for the time being, or whether it should not require the removal of the governor? So ultimately, when you assume that power, which state of emergency indicates, we need to understand the details of the exercise of the powers. And that is exactly the principle behind the United Nations requirement, which this gentleman, the doctor, rightly pointed out. Well, you can't just give yourself power, do anything you like without an indication. So what is the state of emergency for now? Are you going to say, well, police stations have been burnt, policemen are afraid to go to work in the state, so we're going to use state of emergency only for the purpose of rebuilding the police stations and having soldiers, placing soldiers in the police stations to repel any further attack? Is that the state of emergency? You got to say what you want. Otherwise, the question becomes, this state of emergency power will be susceptible to abuses. And if they're susceptible to abuses, then we get to the motive for them. Why? If we enforce our laws effectively, arrest criminals, try them, prosecute them effectively, appoint more judges, make sure the judges are functioning, make sure Nigerian prisons today, 80% of people in Nigerian prisons have not been tried. Wadume is still in detention. Minor is still in detention. So the question is, what are you going to do instead of emergency? Instead of emergency, meaning you are not going to try these people anymore? So without any idea of what the president wants to do with the power he will be seeking for, or seeking under state of emergency, there is confusion. The people want something to be done, but the people are suspicious that the president may have something else in mind. His government has done extremely, extremely poorly, and he's supposed to be judged harshly by the electorate. However, he's trying to dodge that judgment by giving himself special powers. We are suspicious and uncomfortable about it, yet something has to be done. That is the dilemma we face. In Imo State, I'm so worried. In DPA, we are discussing these things, and the gentleman is also very right. The situation in Imo is not the same with Borno State. We have a clearly defined insurgency of military nature and military response. And in that case, we'll be talking about Nigerian capacity militarily to repel Boko Haram. But in Imo State, you're so confused. We don't know what is going on. They're blaming IPOB, even though it is highly unlikely that IPOB had the technical capacity to execute these operations. The people that are called unknown gunmen are trained marksmen who could shoot with exceptional capabilities and even use explosives projected from distances. That cannot be the ragtag Boko Haram, because irrespective of all those things, the current says about ESS, a lot of it is bullshit, is bluff, because they don't have the capacity, they don't have the weaponry, they don't have the training, they don't have a camp, they don't have the operating space to build up. So the situation in Imo State is somewhat very subtle. It cannot be compared exactly with Boko Haram. Yet, we are concerned about the uses of the special powers that the president is going to seek. He needs clarification. That's what I think.
Well, the confusion arising from what our three guests have highlighted is that when you argue that the conditions have not been met for a declaration of the state of emergency, listen to what John Campbell and the other guy, what's his name? Robert Rodberg.
Robert.
All right, so look at what they said about the situations in some parts of the country. They said, due to kidnappings and other crimes, several schools had been forced to shut down. regional quasi-police forces and militias, generally related to state governments, have not been formally sanctioned. And lots of others, federal authorities have successfully ceded management to militants and criminals. In other words, some areas of Nigeria is no longer under the control of the federal security agencies. The Niger State governor said that clearly. Some local governments in Niger State, the police can no longer have control over those areas. So if large swaths of the country are under the control of militias, militants, and terrorists, what would it take for the federal government to establish authority in those areas, if not through a declaration of a state of emergency in those areas? Mr. Nrialike, what do you think?
Thank you very much once again. The truth is that the president cannot use its failure as a reason to have a state of emergency. It takes more than declaring a state of emergency to resolve the problems in the places that you've enumerated. The system, as we are seeing, is clearly the failure of leadership, comprehensive failure of leadership. It has nothing to do with state of emergency. How many places will you declare state of emergency? If you declare state of emergency in Borno, if you declare state of emergency in Niger State, if you declare state of emergency in Kaduna, if you declare state of emergency in Imo State, will you continue to declare state of emergency? Something is fundamentally wrong, which has nothing to do with a system failing as a result of the government having done all it's supposed to do. The system is failing because the government is not doing enough. There is actually nothing that is being done. And there is nothing to show assurance to show that at the end of the day, even if you declare a state of emergency in some of these states, under these particular guides you've talked about, that it will solve the problem. Some weeks back, because of the security challenges, schools were shut down and people were forced to go on break on the pretense that they were going for Salah break. Everybody knew what happened. Some part of Niger State currently are in the hand of the bandits, and certain things are not being done, particularly the arresting of those with criminal tendency. You know, it is not enough. The security problems we are having must not come in a particular way before we know that the system has failed or the system is failing, as Campbell and Mr. Bob put it. As it is now, the government of the day has failed, and it is not something that can be resolved by declaration of state of emergency. What the federal government can do in this stance is to have effective leadership that is based on sincerity. I may digress a little bit. When you look at the Southeast and the problems that are having there, which culminated in the sit at home on the 31st of May, you can see that there are problems that must be discussed. It is the failure to discuss and find an effective and efficient solutions to this problem that are causing this problem. It is a dangerous thing to think that IPOB is ragtag. We had the same feeling about Boko Haram, but today, Boko Haram has virtually taken the entire Northeast out of Nigeria. For you to do anything, you must go through them. They are so comfortable that they are even farming. It was surprising that Boko Haram can farm, plant their things, and 9 months later, they can go and harvest. No problem. It shows how comfortable they are. There is a fundamental problem, and it will not be solved by declaration of state of emergency. the problems are there. But the question is, has the government done enough for you to entrust them with the power, the declaration of state of emergency or the state of emergency powers? The answer is no. So I am very reluctant, and I'm very wary of the fact that this issue of state of emergency is being mooted. Because as it is now, if ever it is done, it will be with great suspicion, because they will employ the state of emergency to suppress political opponents and to gain political milestone. As Mr. Ugwuonye said, that declaration of state of emergency is a
All right, we thank you, Mr. Nrialike. I will have a last question.
Whereby the government, the president is not enough for military men. It is even an aberration that a police station can be burnt down without policemen doing anything. So I believe that the state of emergency cannot effectively be declared since there is a complete failure of leadership.
All right, we thank you very much, Mr. Nrialike. My last question will go to Dr. Bwala now before either we take questions from our audience or except if Ezechukwu has another question to ask. Dr. Bwala, right, arising from what Ifeanyi and Mr. Ugwuonye has said, if we agree that the necessity of a state of emergency arises where the government would like to suppress some civil rights for the greater good of maintaining to secure life and property, is what we are seeing now, where people are lamenting the use of extrajudicial powers in the Southeast. There is a statement today where an organization is calling on the Southeast governors to cry out at the extent where the military is suppressing civil rights on the pretext of fighting insurgency. In fact, I had some videos today where you can see the military treating citizens in an inhumane manner. So right. if the end of a state of emergency is to allow the military suppress rights, but we are seeing the military now suppressing those rights without a state of emergency being declared, is it not better to suppress those rights lawfully, so to say, instead of suppressing those rights extra legally? What do you think?
Well, thank you. Let me, permit me to correct something, the information that Ifeanyi said about Boko Haram farming. It's not a correct situation. Boko Haram isn't farming in Borno. I lost my mother 3 weeks ago. I was in Maiduguri, and I visit my home every now and then. What Boko Haram does is when they are hungry, they will strike and then carry the produce of farmers. Or sometimes when they see there's a movement of food item from one end to the other, like the way they do with armories, they will then strike and then take it. In fact, 3 weeks ago, they even enter Goza to the hospital. They were seeking to carry doctors to the bush so that the doctors would administer to their people. That's what they do. But that is not a situation we have not experienced before. And that's why I said Nigeria is not a failed state. I would tell you, a failed state is a state in which both political and economic power of the country is so weak that the government is no longer in control. That when it happens, then it's a failed state. Now, let me tell you, during Obasanjo, there was Masop. And in fact, there was Bakassi in the East. They were running law and order there. They were doing judgment, hearing matters, appeals, and everything under a democratic setting. And while that was going on, in the Southwest, there was Odudua. Odudua were collecting tax. They were doing a lot of things there. In the Niger Delta, there was this Asari Dokubo group. Then when you come back to the North, there was this issue of Sharia. It was so palpable at the time that you could rightly say Nigeria was in a failed state. You see, because some of the crises in Nigeria, quite frankly, are seasonal because they are politically motivated. A crisis that is not politically motivated stays. Like, for example, the Boko Haram insurgency. It's not politically motivated, it stays. If you see the agitation by IPOB, I don't think it's politically motivated. It's a legitimate demand for self-government because they feel marginalized. The modus operandi is where there is problem. Where you're bringing in violence to pursue that. Scotland is asking for independence. Anybody can do that. Now, to bring it home to our discourse, you see, Campbell was former American ambassador in Nigeria. He's politicized. I'm just being honest with you. I was in the US 2 months ago to meet with Senator John Thune. There were a lot of their politicians that are entrenched with people in the countries where they serve. It's just like Senator Hernandez of New York. Senator Hernandez of New York is a commercial senator. But that is not to suggest there is no crisis. When we began this conversation, I told you there are crises in this country. But I'm glad to let you know this evening that a good number of the crises in Nigeria on their own, they will die down as two political parties determine who are their presidential candidates. Because we know crises that are politically motivated. Just like the crisis in Imo, the governor on Imo is my friend. I know we conducted the Imo North senatorial primaries. I was the secretary of the appeals panel. And even within APC, I can tell you the crisis there. So, and that is why I hold the view that some of the crises in Imo are not IPOB people or ESF. Do you think that the armed robbers and some of these criminal elements that existed before, as soon as this crisis started, they suddenly became born again? No, they are occupying the space. Even in Borno State, do you know the entire Southeast? The geography of the entire Southeast can be put into Borno State to tell you how large the landmass is. And then regarding the police saying that the police are no longer in charge, the police have never been in charge. We have a very limited number of police as required by the United Nations. And even half of the police that we have in a dwarfed police system are with big men and rich people. So what happened is that before now, there were no crises. That's why we did not see the weakness of the country. But the crisis now is exposing our weaknesses. And these weaknesses are not directly linked to President Buhari. It has been from the time immemorial. So I don't politicize this. Where I agree with Mr. Emeka when he started this, he made mention of how long did it take before the president changed the service chief? I was the fiercest critic of the president regarding that. And I'm glad to bring to your notice tonight again that our problem is exacerbating, it's increasing because of the failure of intelligence. The intelligence platform of the country are not politically inclined. They are people who serve in the institution of government. We don't have intelligent collection mechanism at all. And that's why crisis will happen before we hear. Then you talk about the Southeast and Southwest, why the police are very reluctant. Intelligence recently conveyed that since the NSAS, the police felt demoralized and they were no longer motivated to act again. That's why they are so passive that when the crisis become much, people will start begging them. I saw today a protest somewhere in Nigeria, I don't know where exactly. And people are carrying placards saying, police are our friend, please come back. That's what they wanted. So there are crises here and there, but the nation is not in a failed state, I maintain. A failed state is a state. And the president in the Southeast, now in responding to Mr. Emeka, powerful submission, why is it that in the Southeast, the crisis is increasing? You see, president is boxed, he's boxed up somewhere.
Dr. Bwala,
there is nothing...
I'm sorry, let me interrupt you and ask you this question so that, because it harmonizes with the train of your thoughts. Okay. Where a vice president will be reluctant to visit a particular state because of the security reports coming to them, where the president tells us that he will not attend the funeral of a service chief because security reports tell him that it is not safe to do so, where the president today cannot safely visit any state in Nigeria outside Abuja because it is not safe for him to do so, where no governor can step out and go to the marketplace to speak to the people because it is not safe to do so.
I will answer.
What else do we need to declare that this is a failed state? My
brother, the answer is very simple. And I will answer that of the president and the governor, beginning with the governor. You don't mind these governors. They are mostly hypocritical. declare election tomorrow, the governor will go to the creek and conduct election because he needs the vote to get the legitimacy. But whenever they needed money, that is when that's why recently we advised the federal government about the state of emergency. When Zamfara governor said, I will negotiate with bandits, we said any governor that negotiates with bandits, declare state of emergency and remove it. Because intelligence coming saying that governors are using this banditry business to siphon state money. They will just get people to the bush and they say, we paid 500 million. And the money goes to the pocket of the governor. Coming to the president, I cannot see the reason why the president, and people who have been hearing me, they will know that if there is anything I've been criticizing the government and the president on, that is why the president will not engage with Nigerians. Every crisis spot, even if in the headquarters of ESM, and they say they declare nobody can come, you have to demonstrate that is a territorial geography of Nigeria by going there. You know, George Bush said, when he said he was going to go to Afghanistan when they started the war, they said, oh, the place is unsafe. He said, even if bomb is exploding, he will land there. You have to demonstrate strength. But let me tell you my personal opinion as to the reason why the president is not going around. It has nothing to do with his feeling unsafe. During the election, he traveled around the country more than Atiku. All crisis spots, he went there. It's just like during Jonathan. He didn't want to go to Borno, but a few days to the election, he even went to Baga, where the Boko Haram were residing. There is this politics side. In the case of the president, they are managing his health. That's my opinion. I don't have any information from government, but they are managing his health. And I don't think it's a good excuse.
What about the vice president? What about the vice president? Are they also managing his health?
In the case of the vice president, I cannot, and I still don't want to believe that the reason why he didn't go to the place is because of security report. When the case of president, they said 36 hours, there has to be a security information 36 hours before you go. You see, you have to separate between politics and reality. Now, take, for example, if there is election, you remember in the 2019, before 2019 election, what have Nigerians said about president going around the country? He refused to hear. As soon as the election started, he went everywhere in the Southeast. If there is election tomorrow morning, you see these politicians, they will go there. So we as citizens, I believe we must learn how to decipher between the lines and know when a politician is being political and when there is insecurity. I bet upon my calling that the vice president could not have refused going there because of insecurity. There was an APC when Governor Hope Uzodinma was commissioning already in Imo. The vice president was there on Sunday morning. In fact, that morning, I was to go to the US, I was flying to Lagos. Our aircraft was delayed until that of the vice president took off. Why didn't he say he won't go there because of insecurity? So I'm sorry, but when it comes to facts that cannot be substantiated, I don't justify the government.
Dr. Bwala has failed to answer the question I asked him, which is fair enough. I'm happy he addressed other topics. Let's go to Dr. Eculaw to see whether you will address this topic, and then we quickly take some questions, unless the things otherwise.
Okay, very well. But please allow me to address one quick question for Dr. Bwala. Doctor, are you not concerned about the unique political situation of Imo State? Imo State is one in which the governor is presumed highly unpopular, given the circumstances that brought him to power. Are you not concerned that state of emergency being declared in Imo State, of all states, could walk to a point where the governor uses it to make up for his lack of political strength? In other words, why did ESN become such a big problem in Imo State? Why not Abia State, where Nnamdi Kanu came from? So we have a very deep concern, suspicion, particularly for Imo State. Hope Uzodinma is not popular. If you give him extra powers to suspend rights, he could encroach upon the rights of PDP, making them weaker and strengthening himself against 2023. Don't you think that's a concern?
Hope Uzodinma, Governor Hope Uzodinma, on the contrast, is trying to win PDP people by a means other than coercion. In fact, when he became the governor, he won 65% of the PDP by their political way of winning people rather than by force. I was in Imo on a state official visit where I saw for myself some of the projects that Rocha Sokorocha started did not conclude that Governor Hope Uzodinma completed. You see, circumstances that brought Governor Hope Uzodinma to governance will naturally incense people, number one. Then number two, in APC as a party, there are crises. I don't want to mention names of people in APC in that state, beginning with the former governor and then a few other people. There is no agreement. And so they are naturally going to tolerate. I'm not saying they are instigating it, but naturally going to tolerate the situation there. And then thirdly, the reason why ESM and IPOB, they are having a tough time is because if you follow the comments of Mazim Namdi, in fact, even a few days ago, when he was commending some of the governors that obeyed the declaration he made, when he came to Imo, there were so many unpleasant things he said to the governor. And the answer is just simple. He is also not comfortable about the circumstance that brought Governor Hope Uzodinma. And then secondly, Governor Hope Uzodinma for now appears not to be dancing to his tune. In the case of Abia, you don't need a prophet. If you have listened to the last interview that the governor of Abia gave, if you read between the lines, you will know that governor of Abia State, actually told civil servants to stay back at home. So naturally, ESM and IPOB will not be angry with him because he is playing ball, directly or indirectly. In the case of Hope Uzodinma is trying to say, look, my people, we can get what we want, but not by fighting that way. And allow me, please, 1 minute. Let me say something, because a greater number of people on this platform are Igbos. And I have a land in independent layout in Enugu. I have, all through my life, I grew up with Igbo people. I hear Igbo very well, but let me have an advice. I thought I was going to engage people like Mazi. In the Northeast, when Boko Haram started, because the people in Northeast did not want Goodluck Jonathan, they did not coordinate themselves to fight insecurity. They were tasked, the leaders. In fact, when Ihejirika was hard on fighting insurgency there, at a point they accused him of killing our people. That's how they started. Now, because he didn't like the president, now the man Goodluck Jonathan has gone, but Northeast is 100 years behind. I see the same thing happening in the Southeast. The governors in the Southeast are not making serious effort to engage with their people because some of them don't like President Buhari. I don't have a problem with you. You don't have to like everybody. But the problem is that if you do not engage them to stop destruction of installations, the most productive people in Nigeria are the Igbo. Nobody believes in the Nigerian project more than an Igbo man. But I pray that they do not allow what is happening to push the Southeast backwards.
Thank you very much, Bwala. And let me take this question, because obviously we've somehow managed to come down to the Southeast, and we've pinned it down to ESN and IPOP here. But this question then is for you. Yesterday, day before yesterday, I listened to the former governor of Anambra State, Chief Dr. Chukwuemeka Ezeife. Yesterday, I listened to the Senate Minority Leader, Senator Nrialike. Both of these gentlemen and statements are alluding to something, and I want your honest take on this. They're alluding to the fact that, like someone said here, that I think Ugwuonye said that the surgical nature of these operations appear not to be within the capabilities of these entities being mentioned. Now, when I just opposed the comments of Dr. Ezeife and Nrialike stating that also no one should also lose sleep, that it could be that there is some sort of fifth columnist trying to do something because of the quote-unquote people clamoring for the Igbo presidency. What's your take on it?
Yes, Governor Umahi came to APC. I am well aware that, well, again, I do not wish to be quoted, but I'm well aware that some young people in the North, in APC, began this agitation that power should go to the Southeast. in APC. And they were thinking about if power will go to the Southeast, who are they going to support? Not that they give somebody power, but who are they going to support? And then the idea of Dave Umahi came because they said Ebonyi State is more nationalistic friendly than some of the existing governors who have been in the party for long. He was lured into coming to the party, the younger generation of the northern elite in the party. Now, I also know that people are saying that they will support power moving to the Niger Delta. I don't know if it is they feel threatened by the Southwest. I'm talking of young people. I'm not quoting big people in the political party because there is always this conversation among the young people. But what Ehinaya Abaribe said, I listened to his interview yesterday. In fact, it was the TV people that wanted to put the words into his mouth. They say, maybe, what do you have to say about conspiracy theory, whether there is an agenda against the Igbos? I will give you just a graphic answer, an honest answer like you have asked. When ENSA started in Lagos and it led to the burning of places, at the beginning, everybody was on course. As soon as the Southwestern people saw that, this thing is attacking Tinubu, attacking installations in Yoruba land, immediately they backed out because they know that you cannot destroy what is in your area and still make the same case. In the Southeast, the answer is simple. Who is it that said, and it cometh to pass when the Lord has not commanded? Who is in the Southeast now that can get Mazin Nandi and say, we are making progress? You are making progress. Now, embrace this idea of a dialogue. If you approach this government with dialogue without prejudice to the criminal cases against you, they must listen to you. You have made the case to sit at the table. None of them have been able to do that. I'm just being very frank. You asked me for a frank answer. And most of the governors, or some of the governors in the Southeast, I personally know them. Ehina Abaribe and I have engaged ourselves one time in the National Assembly when he was challenging me for making some comment about Chidoka, and then we cracked joke. But the truth of the matter, sir, is that there is no conspiracy anywhere in the Southeast. The people fomenting trouble in the South, take the graphic case of Imo. Are they the Fulani headsmen? I believe that majority might not even be the ESN people. It might be armed robbers and the rest taking advantage. But to me, who has spoken to them? Now, at Abia, the reason why Abia is at peace is because the governor is not engaging Nnamdi Kanu or the ESN people. If he begins to take the position that Opus Odema is taking, I am telling you, he will have it very, very rough. Because the modus operandi that Nnamdi Kanu is taking is not that will give the presidency. Because let me tell you something, sir. When it comes to election and winning position in government, it is not like chapter 14 of the Constitution, federal character, where somebody will now say, from the South is come collect president. It is political participation. It is playing your game. God, if this man, the blessed memory, Chuba Kadibo were to be alive, Chuba Kadibo would have been running for presidency and he will win because of the approaches given to the politics. The politicians from the Southeast, when they come in politics, they come with aggression. There is this wisdom that says, even what you have in your mind, keep it. When you win, then you can implement what is in your mind. They come to politics with aggression. The demand comes with aggression rather than lobby. And that type of a thing, in some people, it will put fear. In another set of people, it will then put that kind of feeling of apathy. But there is nothing stopping somebody from the Southeast to run for the presidency in any political party and to win it and become president of Nigeria. Nothing will stop that.
Definitely, there is nothing stopping. But you also, Dan, before I yield, you also made a point, which I think is sometimes, Nigerians, we take this for granted. Somehow you alluded to the point that if the agitation in the Southeast continues, that no one is going to give them power, right?
No one will support.
Well, no one will support, yes. Now, Maiden asks, what was happening in the Northeast and the Northwest when Yar'Adua contested and won? And what was happening in the Northeast and Northwest when General Muhammadu Buhari contested and won? I think, when we begin to look at issues this way, as if once you have crisis, then you lose your power. You lose your right to contest or the right to be supported. Okay, so
The answer is simple. Let me tell you, this country, Nigeria, is being shared by the Southwest and Northwest. We are the one deceiving ourselves to say the North. When has power moved to the Northeast? When has power moved to North Central? It's Northwest and Southwest that are ruling Nigeria. If you hear agitation, power should go to the South. The Southwest will make the biggest case. Power should come to the North. The Northwest will make the biggest case. The other regions are not, in fact, Northeast and Southeast are the biggest victim in this situation. I don't know whether there is a mystery behind the East-East. Southeast are victims, Northeast are victims. We are even more a victim, I'm telling you the truth, than even the Southeast. But under the corporate name, the North, are they not all in the North? That is the fundamental problem. Now, when you talk about if crisis erupts, then you will not make a case. The reason why Northwest win their population, the reason why Southwest win their population, they use their population to negotiate. That is the simple truth. If Atiku were to be from the Northwest 2019, Atiku would have defeated the president with more than 3 million votes. But Atiku is not from the Northwest. As they are talking about power moving to the South now, people are talking about Southwest. Why are they not talking about Southeast and South-South?
I actually have a question, if you don't mind, a question for the...
Yeah, Emeka, go on.
Dr. Bwala, I thought you wanted to emphasize something about Nigerian politics, which is that it's really difficult for anybody in the Southeast or Southwest to win election without the support of the North because of the preponderance of the North. I thought that was basic truth. And somebody from the Southeast will essentially have to receive support from the North. In other words, the North will agree to power rotation. Otherwise, if a Northern candidate runs against him in that party, or even in an opposing party, he would take a chunk of votes that could have got him. So I thought maybe you were being diplomatic. You didn't want to admit it, that it is practically impossible for an Igbo candidate or even a Yoruba candidate to win without support from the North. Let me give you an example. If the Southeast and West agree and produce one candidate, and the entire North, that is Northeast, Northwest, North Central, produce one candidate, it's going to be very hard for the Southern candidate, even combined as it is, to win. Back to the notion of preponderance of the North, which Ojukwu pointed out as one of the fundamental imbalance in the Nigerian political thing. So when you said that somebody will support the East for the East to win, my mind went to that, but you tended to deviate from that. I was wondering if you were just being politically correct.
No. Let me respond, sir. You see, that is the problem. Like you say Southeast, but then when you come to the North, you say North. You see, anytime a comparison is made, once it is South, you don't say South and North. You say Southeast and North, because the position that Northwest always takes, people tend to think that North Central and Northeast follow suit. Do you know that Alex Ekwueme, if he had won the primaries in Jos, Alex Ekwueme would have emerged as the president? He had the highest consensus of the Northern people supporting him. Alex Ekwueme didn't grow in the North, but Alex Ekweme's politics, if you have watched his antecedents, is just like that of Nnamdi Azikiwe. Is nationalistic. Now, do you know you have in North Central and Northeast people that have more support and sympathy for the Southeast? So why don't the candidate from the Southeast, when you come to the North, see it as 3 geopolitical zones? Don't see it as one, and make the case. Now, even if you want to make the case from a religious standpoint, there are still Christians in the Northeast, Christians in the North Central. If you make the case from a political standpoint, there are people that will listen to you, but this is about interest. So here is my point. Not even a Northwestern person can win the election without the support of the other region. But see how it works. If Southwest, how many states do you have in the Southwest? And then you have in Lagos alone, you have more Igbos than the entire part of the other northern Nigeria apart from Yorubas. But why is it that the vote in Lagos, for example, goes to another party and not to the candidate from the Southeast? The answer is politics. So a Southeasterner can become president in Nigeria if he makes the case to get 70% of vote from the South-South, if he can get 35 to 40 from the Southwest, then come to the North-Central. The Igbos are in the North-Central very, very much. Apart from Lagos, the other part of the country where Igbos are more is North-Central. You get 35%, come to the Northeast. If you lose Northwest, but get these other zones, you'll be emerged as the president. But you have to know how to calculate, because strategy, if you don't know strategy, you suffer tragedy.
Well, thank you very much for that answer. But obviously, we saw how people who came out in Okota to vote in the 2019 election, obviously, we saw how their votes counted. And that's so much about vote counting. Now, we will be taking questions from the public. But before I do, before we started, I did informally ask about something, but I'm going to bring it up here before we leave, or before I take questions. And that is, Barrister Ugwuonye, you obviously, you are one person that I know very well that is very conversant with social media, and you use that a lot. And you have seen in the words of Patrick Obiagbo, the Parakbo is in between the presidency and Twitter. So, and you know, that to the point that the president made some comments that people thought it was genocidal, to a point that his tweet was deleted. And yesterday we saw that we saw the Minister of Information come out to say that Twitter had an agenda in Nigeria, and we thought it ended there. Today, a couple of hours, about 3 hours ago, we saw that that the federal government of Nigeria, via the Ministry of Information and Culture, has banned Twitter from Nigeria. What's your take?
I think it is the worst blunder that President Buhari would make upon several other blunders. You have to understand that there's a limit to what you can control. In the United States, Twitter and Facebook banned Donald Trump. Donald Trump, you must know, despite the fact that I oppose him, I oppose his policies, he remains the single most influential politician in the United States, because even out of office, he's in total control of the Republican Party, far more so than even President Biden on his own party. So, yet, he understood that he could not fight the social media. There's a limit to it, because when you fight Twitter, who are you really fighting? You are fighting the users of Twitter. The people angry about that decision are not necessarily Twitter, the owner of Twitter, it's not McDorsey. The people angry are the users. So these media platforms, when you think of them, you shouldn't think of the owners or the founder. You should think of the fact that they brought people together. They brought millions of people together. They enabled millions of people to communicate. They connected people. So when you ban them, you disconnect the people they connected. People who can no longer tweet, who can no longer communicate with their friends, they are the ones President Buhari has provoked. If I were his advice, I would tell him, do anything else you want to do, but don't tamper with these platforms. You will be the only government, with the exception of North Korea, that would try to ban them. He should move the users. You should get the users of Twitter to express their displeasure with the banning of the president's tweets, but also it smacks of a high degree of megalomania. Why would President Buhari take it so personal that they took away his tweet? Of course, his tweet caused outrage, and the outrage were expressed by the users of Twitter, and the owner of Twitter was sensitive to the outrage. That was why they took it out. So he could have come back, corrected himself, continued to use Twitter, but banning it is a terrible mistake. For how long would that go? I think he has lost. Though he's not coming for any, he's not going to go for another election. But if politics and democracy really count, I think the president has shot himself in the foot.
Okay, thank you very much. Before I get to Bwala to have his opinion on this, I think Barrister Ifeanyi. So, what do you think? You know, there is this joke going on online now that the Nigerian government used Twitter to ban Twitter. What's your take?
Okay. You see, when you talk about the banning of Twitter, the banning of Twitter is akin to declaration of a state of emergency. Actually, it shows a lack of tolerance on the part of the federal government. It is exactly what I've been talking about. You know, I listened attentively to Mr. Dr. Daniel. The truth about it is that there is a very great suspicion about the Southeast and the Southeast presidency, in as much as that is not exactly what we are discussing. But in the last discourse, it took a whole chunk of the discussion in the last some minutes back. He gave an example of Ugwuonye could have been the president of Nigeria, assuming certain things did not happen. It is exactly that conspiracy that denied Ugwuonye the presidency that have been denying the Southeast the presidency. And it is on the basis of that. And when you see certain things like appointment, marginalization in appointments, insensitivity, as we are speaking, there are 27 security-minded appointments that are being made. None is occupied by the Southeast. 27. None is occupied by the Southeast. And there are so many other things that were being done. The issue of the fact that until there is change in the electoral system, where you have to bring in electronic system of voting, things will never improve. Elections are not conducted in Nigeria. What is conducted is that some people will sit down somewhere, the very powerful men. It is not a question, they give the percentage and they do some of these things. So that is exactly what was happening. The anger of the president, I stand to be corrected, is the fact that he made that tweet of genocide against the Southeast or against the Igbo race. And there was an outrage. And as a result of that outrage, that tweet was deleted by Twitter. He became annoyed. That is just the gospel truth. And on the basis of being annoyed, he was able to suspend Twitter today. And it is exactly the same thing if you allow the president, because before now they've been mulling with the idea of controlling social media. They can even control the entire social space, because the next thing I was thinking about it, the next person that will be, the next social medium that will be affected will be Facebook. The next one will be Instagram. And it will exactly achieve the aim, because as we stated at the beginning of this particular discourse, even journalists are now endangered species. People no longer talk easily about certain things. You are very careful about what you say. The other day, channel television was clamped down because of it. Was this particular thing that caused the insecurity in the Southeast, because the Southeast are feeling as if we are not heard. We have to do something so that they can hear us. And on the basis of that, there is this problem. So it is an irony that the federal government will use Twitter to announce the banning of Twitter. And the suspension of Twitter in Nigeria is shooting ourselves on the foot. And we have destroyed a medium that could have allowed us to discuss. I expected the president is not infallible. The federal government is not infallible. We can make mistakes. The most important thing is admit the mistake. The tweet was wrong because it's not supposed to come from a president of a country like Nigeria. So having said that particular thing, he showed insensitivity to a group of persons. And that is exactly the problem we are having. Until these things are discussed, It's a roundtable called and discussed adequately, the problem will not stop. There must be a discussion. And we are talking about restructuring.
Okay.
One of the things that will cure this problem of insecurity and everything that is happening in the country is restructuring. When you bring restructuring both in orientation, in the way you see Nigerians, and until we start thinking as Nigerians, this problem will never abate.
Okay, thank you.
We start thinking as Nigerians and start seeing Nigerians as Nigerians. We are not as multicultural like America. America has more different races, different races, more than we have in Nigeria. But they still manage to come together. They still manage to take care of situations. They still manage to manage their securities very well. But the situation is not like that in Nigeria. There is need for us to start accepting where we are wrong and start doing something about it. That is exactly what this tweet and tweet suspension has exposed in the federal government.
Thank you, Barrister there. Let me round this segment up with my good friend and brother, Dr. Daniel Bwala there. Mr. Bwala, I have the following questions. I mean, before I do ask this question, I will make the following disclaimer. I do understand that you are the special advisor to the Deputy Senate President. So the opinions that you are going to give in the questions that I'm asking is your personal opinion. This is not the stand of the Deputy Senate President or the government. Then that's cleared. Would you then tell me what is your view on the tweet, the exact tweet? Because remember, the president had about 4 tweets when he talked about the insecurity, when he talked about those burning INEC offices, and when he talked about that he's going to support INEC, to get and do their job. In these 4, in that thread of 4 tweets, no one had issues with when he talked about, dealing with criminals, but it appears the majority of Nigerians had issues when he came to the point of saying that he was going to treat them, quote here, the same way that, in a language they understand, referring to the civil war. 2 questions therefrom is, 1, what is your honest take on this? Secondly, what is your take on the ban on Twitter?
Okay, context. INEC people visited him to complain that the crisis in the Southeast will affect the conduct of election and that there is no security in the Southeast. In response to them, he assured them of everything that they need to conduct the election. Then he made reference to the agitators in the Southeast who resort to violence. There are 2 types of agitators. There are non-violent agitators and violent agitators. The president was making reference to the violent agitators. He said they are too young to know what we suffered in the so many months during the Civil War.
No, sorry here to interject, because but it's not new. In 2016, when these same group were having their when they said they were praying for their leader who was incarcerated or who was in prison then, and when the military went in there to shoot them in Aba, in a school compound that they were. I remember vividly that one of the Al Jazeera reporters asked him a question, and he said almost the same thing that he said in this tweet. And at this point, there was nothing like violence. They were only chanting and using flags. So contest again, so that you put that also in context.
Okay. Regarding the flags, when Terrorism Prevention Act was amended and IPOB was proscribed, the use of, if you read
that's before the prescription. That is before the 2016.
Before the prescription.
Yes.
Now, I need to know the exact word he said so I don't imply in my interpretation. But I am saying,
I can play the video if you don't mind. Well, go ahead.
We have all the time, or you can mention, but let me tell you regarding that day. He now said, they don't know what we have gone through during the Civil War. And recall, the Civil War was an agitation. Even though The Ojukwu went into violence because he felt Aburi Convention was not honored. It was a justifiable reason for him to have gone into violence. And Buhari is saying that we kill ourselves. He wasn't making reference to only Igbos. He's trying to say the danger associated with civil war. Then he now said, regarding still to the violent people, we will teach them in the language they will understand. But because Buhari can never, for example, when he kept quiet, they say Buhari must speak. He must speak to Nigerians. Now he has spoken. They say he should have kept quiet. Let me tell you something. The Southeastern people are not fair to the person of President Buhari. I will tell you today. President Buhari sought for power in collaboration with the Igbos and failed severally. In America, after the vice president and vice president, the most powerful cabinet position, you can check that for yourself, it's not the Attorney General as we have in Nigeria, it's the Secretary of State. In Nigeria, the Secretary of State is an Igbo man. As I speak to you today, facts should be able to... Who is
the Secretary of State?
The Foreign Affairs Minister is an Igbo man from Enugu State. From Enugu State.
No, but doctor, in Nigeria, the Minister of Foreign Affairs is not the next powerful cabinet office holder.
So that's why I gave you the context. I said, that's why I gave the context. I said, like in Nigeria is the Attorney General. In America, yes, the Attorney General means nothing. It is the Secretary of State. But I'm saying, correct. Sometimes we compare with America. So the Foreign Affairs Minister is the president of all ambassadors and all PAMSECs, federal PAMSECs. There is nowhere the president will go in the world today that the person who will set the agenda is not Godfrey Onyema.
Right. I think the Dr. Bwala, if we allow you, you will take all our time.
Okay, let me answer the Twitter.
But hold on, Dan. Sorry, I want him to clarify these two questions.
Yeah, just clarify that, and then this discussion must end in the next 20 minutes.
All right, thank you.
And we have to take questions from the audience.
I hold the belief that the decision of the federal government to ban Twitter is ill-advised and is wrong because it will amount to gagging free speech. What the federal government would have done, like I advised a few days ago, the day they took down his tweet, I said the federal government of Nigeria to launch an official complaint to the US Congress so that the Congress will summon Jack Dorsey to explain his roles in Nigeria. And I gave context, how he played the role in NSAS and the rest. That is democratic way. I complain about you, that's democratic. But when you gag the use of Twitter, first, it will not even work because people will find other means. And then two, it will be like you slap your wife in marriage. That is the beginning of the crisis. It will lead to another thing, And I want to tell you today that the presidency, the federal government will rescind from that decision.
Okay, thank you very much. So Daniel, are you still there? But also, I think there was a point made that Ojukwu eventually went to armed conflict. But I think the history book that I read taught me very well. And I think the right thing there is that basically the federal government came in, not the other way around, that he did not start any aggression. Anyway, thank you, Dan. We can now move to the audience and take questions.
Yes, let's have the first question from Melitius Abonyi. He has had more patience for a long time now, keeping his hand up. Melitius Abonyi, you can unmute yourself, please.
Please, can we make the questions very, very snappy so that we are running out of time?
Why is it that immediately I mentioned his name, I didn't see him anymore? Melitius?
No, he's there, but quickly unmute yourself.
Okay, he's there.
Hello, good evening, everybody.
Yes.
Good evening, go ahead.
Thank God I joined this talk shop today. There are a few things I've been, unfortunately, I've been given restricted to a very few minutes. I think that the thing there where Dr. Daniel Bwala is not seeing it clearly is that he hasn't appreciated the hatred that President Buhari has for the Igbos. I am a law-abiding Igbo man. I practice medicine in the north. And I know that he, Dr. Bwala himself, is even in more danger than myself as an Igbo man. I don't know where he comes from, but his name tells me that it's a minority northerner. And he is in worse situation than me, who is an Igbo person practicing. I think the problem here is they've not appreciated the fact that President Buhari just hates the average Igbo person, no matter what he does, no matter where he is, no matter where he's residing or practicing his trade. That is number one. Number two is that the rest of Nigeria has not appreciated what the Igbo man stands for. First is that we don't agree that whatever you say, we accept it. There's this speech by the President General of Ohanes and Igbo, Professor George Obiozor. He said, no, everybody shouldn't accept it. The rest of Nigeria must accept that the Igbo man doesn't accept the elders' speech as being overridden. I practice politics in the North in addition to my profession. And I noticed that, for instance, the chairman of PDP in Abuja, whatever he says, everybody says, Daudu. That means everybody has accepted it. That is not the way we were brought up. We were brought up in the fact that everybody will have a say. Then we will distill the...
I think the internet is not playing there. So can we take the next person, Ezechukwu, please?
Thank you very much. My pleasure. I'll just briefly mention on certain things Mr. Bwala has stated here. The first being on his political calculations. The reality is that votes don't count in Nigeria. So all those, if you get 70% here, 30% here, under the Nigerian situation, and that simply does not work. On the issue of the state of emergency, the reality is that we're already living in a state of emergency in Nigeria. So, I mean, the military do whatever they want to do wheresoever. The courts are not in session. So there is, in effect, a state of emergency in Nigeria. Even when your rights are breached or overridden, you can't do nothing about it. People are languishing in police stations. The military is arresting. Nobody's challenging them because the courts for the past 6 weeks have not been functional. And the only thing that can check a state of emergency anywhere is the courts, and they're not working. So we're already in Nigeria.
Okay, thank you. So I hope you are making note of those. Daniel, can you take the next?
Yes, we have Tango. Do you want that Daniel to deal with the questions, or you want to have more questions?
No, let's take the questions. Then he can. Obviously, I believe he's noting them down. So.
All right. Okay, Tango, please.
The question goes to Barrister. What I've been listening. So all he was saying is a big insider, and they have interest. So when somebody talks, I join him with his interest and so on the meaning of what he's saying. State of emergency, personally, I don't support it because Buhari has enough power already. And state of emergency now will be a total call for army takeover. It will reach a coup d'etat, and it will be more bloody. Now we can talk, we can argue. When army takeover, all position will be null and void. So, what the other speaker, Ifeanyi, made a point. Private government, Nrialike is popular, has a reason because of failed leadership in the eastern side of our country. The leadership failed, so Nrialike stepped in. So what they will do, we need a total moral build-up, moral brushing. That all this is to stop. So for me, state of emergency will not solve the problem.
All right, thank you. What's the next guy?
The last person, I think, is Ugwuonye.
Okay, thank you very much. I think Dr. Bwala is only trying to be self-protective because That's actually in respect of his position. You know, he has to defend his daily bread. Otherwise, he knows the truth as a middle belter. He knows that the situation in the middle belt is as precarious as the situation in Igbo land. There's no difference between the siege of the middle belt, especially the Christian of which he is, and that of the Igbo. And that is part of the problem we have in Nigeria today. When part of the oppressed join the oppressor to even oppress his own people. So that is one. Secondly, the Southeast is already in a state of emergency, because if state of emergency is pronounced now in Anambra State, it's just a question of official pronouncement. But de facto, the state of emergency existing in Southeast is worse than what it was when state of emergency was declared in Plateau State. Because in Plateau State, when state of emergency was declared under President Olusegun Obasanjo, people were moving freely. The army was not harassing people. The army was not killing people. The police was not dragging people and taking them to unknown destinations and then kill them and brought them out to declare them unknown gunmen and put some weapons around them and then snap them as they used to do. The only difference was that the area was removed and the military administrator put there. But the people were staying, were living their normal lives, no situation. So when people talk of state of declaring state of emergency in the Southeast, I don't think it's just a question of trying to give you some legalities. Presently, in practical terms, there's already a state of emergency. Finally, he was talking about Igbo. You see, what I don't like is people using the issue of presidency to cajole the Igbo man. Whenever they want to say something, they say, if you don't do this, why the Igbo man cannot be president? Igbo man cannot. For Christ's sake, there's no person exclusively meant to be voted for or to vote for people. The problem why the Igbo man has not been being elected is that he has refused to go and campaign. He has refused to engage on political investments. He has only depended on one source, and that source is that it is only the Fulani that can put me in power. By the time the woman realizes that people like Bwala from his zone can be empowered, the minorities in the South can be empowered, that the West can be empowered outside the Fulani, that the woman will become president. After all, in the first and second term of Obasanjo's reign, look at the statistics of the voting pattern. The whole North, the whole core North voted for AP. They voted for AP. Yet Obasanjo won. So it's not a question of using presidential election to connect it with the conflict in the Southeast. Until the leadership of the Southeast becomes proactive in terms of patriotism, self-protective patriotism, we cannot talk about it. So
thank you very much, Dr.
I believe that Dr. Daniel Bwala should come out in the deepest sincerity of his mind to tell us that he is also suffering like us.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, that's a very fine place to leave it. So Bwala, sadly, I don't want this to be as if it's only all the question is being pushed at you. But if you may respond, then we take a closing shot from all the participants.
Okay, thank you. I'll be very brief on all of them. I've itemized them. First person talked about the Igbo man is independent. He does what he wants, and it is about time Nigerians take an Igbo man for that. That assertion, that strength is there's this thing called the gift and the curse. That gift is the curse of the Igbo man. It works in all other areas of life. In politics, it doesn't work like that. In politics, you will swallow your pride if you have identified that what is coming will be for the common good of one amongst you. If the high time you know it. If you don't know it, the Southwest and the Northwest will forever rule in Nigeria. That's what happens. In the North, traditional ruler will call you, they will call all the people and say, look, if two of you fight, this thing will fall in the hand of the other person. Somebody should chew his pride. And in politics, so I'm saying in answer to that, that idea of independence, I stand by my word, I can't change, and the rest will work in other aspects of life. But in politics, without compromise, you go nowhere. Number two, somebody raised issue of political calculation, that all these things I'm saying, getting this vote here, getting this vote here, they don't work. I'm telling you they work. Let me tell you why in the North, apart from the allegation that there are underage voting, the political education of the North, a professor in other parts of Nigeria may not know. I'll give you just one example. That Fulani man you see in the thick forest that knows nothing about current affairs has a transistor radio, and he hears news from Voice of America and Voice of Germany, while we are online watching Facebook. And then secondly, if the Northerner wants to win election, he goes through the medium that he can get to the man in the bush. When it comes to political education, you can accuse them for anything. In political education, how to galvanize, they use every means available. In terms of calculation and relating to when they said the whole North voted for AP and Obasanjo, AP was a party that Buhari ran. At the time, Buhari was very unpopular. The North were with the PDP because they were in charge in the party, in the PDP party. But in 2015 election, what happened was that because of the hatred that was built along two political parties, some of the Northerners in PDP.
Sorry, I think the internet is frozen. But again, I would probably come back to Bwala, but Barrister Emeka.
Yes, my brother.
You know, based on the questions they asked, what's your reaction to that?
Well, what I saw there is, you know, a reflection of the general mistrust and discomfort. One of the guys was talking about Bwala protecting his meal ticket, which is unfair, really, to say. What we have to understand is that the situation of things in Nigeria today is such that nobody trusts anybody. And that sets us back very, very deeply, really. So it also indicates that even Dr. Bwala is being perceived as not being fully Northern enough, that he was a minority in the North and all those things. What I can read to it is just a reflection of the deepening level of distrust. And this government has not done anything to improve on that, on the state of affairs as regards mutual trust among Nigerians. His appointments are lopsided. His appointments were never explained. There was never an effort to let Nigerians know why certain people are consistently being appointed from certain other people. And this leads me to something which Dr. Bwala may be interested in noting. Many people outside the East are expecting the Igbo intelligentsia, the Igbo elite, to control IPOB and ESN. This is from my assessment. The Northerners are not, the Northern elites are not taking the silence of the Igbo elite kindly, because you have IPOB with incendiary language, with very bellicose and belligerent pronouncements, even threatening Ohaneze, even threatening everybody, and yet the Igbo elite never came out and said, no, 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 you're not going to get far with violence. We're better off with this and that. So, but the question is, the federal government marginalizes the Igbo elite. The Igbo elite, the educated Igbo, is not given proper position in government. He will either leave Nigeria to pursue life outside Nigeria, or he goes to teach in a school where he makes poor salary. And then the Igbo, the uneducated Igbo man becomes a businessman, a trader, an influencer. So you see all of them behind IPOB, pushing IPOB. And someone says, come on, what are the educated Igbos to do? The educated Igbos are powerless. They're disempowered. The government doesn't appoint them. And yet, you know, we complain about lopsided appointment. You know, so this mistrust exists. This president, more than any other before him, whether by luck or not, had done the least to improve on trust among Nigerians. He is that's why they consider him the most sectional president, the most nepotistic president. There are a whole lot of things said about Buhari, which as a person, as a social scientist, I know it is not logical to attribute all these failings to one individual, because you will ask yourself, if Buhari was that bad, how did he advance to the level where he advanced? How did he get all the support and trust he got? How did he get the number of votes? So Buhari cannot be as bad personally as he's painted, but his reputation is very terrible. And I saw elements of mistrust and discomfort, such that they've been accusing the very eloquent and very, very balanced Dr. Bwala as trying to save his meal ticket.
But that is where I wanted to, that's the last point I wanted to make. I don't take offense. I've learned in life that people must be allowed to express their opinion. It is better it is said that someone keeps it in his heart. But it doesn't change the fact of what I am and what I stand for. People who know me in this government of President Buhari will attest to the fact that amongst all the people who are in APC supporting the party, if there is one person that never fails to call out the government or even the president when he feels the president is right or wrong, it is me. I've never hidden that. And talking about bread, I am a very successful lawyer. How much do they pay in the National Assembly? Let me even give you one funny story. During this bill, Bill Gates bill, that Speaker Gbajabiamila was allegedly said he wanted to sponsor, I was on air and I fiercely criticized that. He reported me to the Deputy President of the Senate and said people called him and told him that what I was saying was like the Deputy President of the Senate expressing his opinion. And so people felt that the Deputy President of the Senate is attacking him. When the Deputy President of the Senate drew my attention to it, I just reminded him of one thing. How did we come to know each other? I criticized you and you sent for me to explain your version of the story. And we became friends. You have known me as somebody who bears his mind, even if it is against the government. I may be right or wrong. So I'm trying to say, in essence, to my brother, who thinks I'm one of those people that will say things to bear bread. I started canvassing for President Buhari when I was doing my transfer to power to the English bar here in England. From that time till this moment that I'm speaking to you, I have never received 1 naira. And there are people in government here. 1 naira from this government. Never. 1 naira I've never received from this government. 3 times my name was shortlisted for appointment and turned down on the ground that I could not be controlled. And I took it in good faith. There is life beyond 4 years and 8 years of a politician. This Buhari we are talking, in the next 1.5 years, it will be history.
Exactly.
It will be history. We will start looking for another scapegoat.
Messiah.
And posterity, sorry, let me round up by saying posterity will judge whether President Buhari has hatred for the Igbos. I personally believe he does not have the hatred for the Igbos. He may not have done enough as far as the demands of the Igbos are concerned. But I am closing by saying that President Buhari, as we speak, has done more projects in the Southeast than President Goodluck Jonathan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So, Dan, I think we might have...
Nrialike will give us closing submissions before we call it a day.
Okay, thank you very much. This is a wonderful opportunity. Just like every other person, The truth about it is that the security problem we are having is as a result of mistrust. Something needs to be done about it. I have sat down in my quiet moment to think about Buhari and what actually went wrong. This was a man who have told us that his personal staff, majority of his personal staff are Igbos. The people that personally working with him are Igbos, majority of them are Igbos. The man that had Tubo Kadibo before him, Umezweke, as his deputy. What actually went wrong? I tried to rationalize. I came to the fact that the sickness that he started having immediately he took over might have contributed. And certain persons hijacked his administration and are managing it in such a way that they don't want people from other ethnic groups to come in and see what is happening, particularly when they remember what happened to Yaradua and the people that opened up to Nigeria about Yaradua's case. I looked.
Well, the internet, I don't know if we're already banned.
If Bwala in the United Kingdom can have internet problems, what have Ifeanyi Nrialike in Abuja will also have one.
Oh, are you not hearing me very well?
Okay, no, we thought they were banned you as well. So
no, they didn't ban me. They didn't ban me. Yeah, let me round up in the next 30 seconds. You see, the crisis that we had in Imo State was as a result of the governor calling for military to come and take over and the streets and ensure security. People were miffed and they putting into consideration the manner of his emergence. It all caused the problem. And just like some of us rightly observed, equally his failure to dance to the tune of ESN and the IPOB. But the truth must be told that if there is need to declare state of emergency on insecurity in the country. It is not the sort of state of emergency that is being declared according to Section 305 of the Constitution. But this one is the one that will be declared so that this Nigeria can reclaim its country. As it is today, we don't travel freely again. You don't do functions freely again. You don't do anything because there is massive insecurity. Our children are not going. As we are speaking now, they are not writing WAEC. The WAEC will be written in around October, November, because of insecurity that is gradually altering the system. There is need for us to go back. There is need for this leadership to take effective charge and do what it can. But if not, all the mystery about Buhari will just go into. He still has 1.5 years to try to reclaim everything. But the declaration Section 305 is a no-no because we don't need it. Having failed, he cannot get more power by pursuant to Section 305. So I feel that there is need for Buhari and his advisors to wake up and do the correct thing. This country needs proper direction as it concerns security. There is need, the banditry, kidnapping, and everything is too much. I hope that there's something will be done about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So that's a very fine place to leave it. So Dan, your closing shot.
Yes, thank you. I note what Barrister Ezechukwu mentioned, which was the fulcrum of my questions when I asked Dr. Bwala, and then the political responses overshadow what I was trying to say, that even without a state of emergency being declared, the military are on the street harassing people, detaining without trial. People are being detained for more than 24 hours. So even if a state of emergency is meant to give room for such type of behavior, we are still seeing them now without a state of emergency. So why don't you simply declare a state of emergency so that those extra legal powers we exercise will now be enveloped with the legal government? But thank you all very much. It's been a very enlightening discussion. Thank you very much, Mr. Ugwuonye, for being with us tonight. We are very happy to have you around. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, Dr. Daniel Bwala. It's been a good pleasure to have you around. Once again, thank you.
Thank you.
Barrister Ifeanyi Nrialike, thank you also. It's been very happy. We're happy to have the legal perspective you brought to the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.